Hello, this is Taylor Ellwood with Magical Experiments, and I'm excited today because I have with me the fabulous Anima Noira. Welcome to the show. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and where we can find you on the web.
Hey, well, you can find me at inner-ignition.net. Inner Ignition is my website, or as Anima Noira on YouTube, on Facebook.
And Anima, I've been following your posts for a while now. You and I've talked a little bit online occasionally and commented on each other's stuff. But I mean, you've been around for a long time and I've been around for a long time. And what I found interesting is like you have this wide breadth and depth of knowledge and different esoteric work, but a lot of the work that you're doing right now is definitely seems to be along the lines of the Luciferian current and working with
Yes.
the demonic practices. Could you tell us a little bit about your magical background and like when you got into magic and the evolution of your magical path?
It has always been Luciferian, truth be told.
Mhm.
I just had different, periods in my life where I actually had to hide it from people because of, even though I was working as a professional witch for a decade in Prague, my audience would not be receptive to me, declaring like flat out left-hand path. It's just way more fringe where I come from. So I had to keep it a little bit more under the wraps. I associated with all kinds of traditional occultists, people from lodges, different brotherhoods,
Mhm.
female circles, goddess circles, Kabbalists, reincarnated famous magicians from the past. You name it. I think I have pretty much brushed shoulders with everything that goes on in the contemporary Western occult in Europe and in the United States, including some very obscure currents, including some very dangerous people. So it's been quite the ride, and it's been 20 years almost.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm slowly becoming the old school, maybe. At least that's how it feels when I look at witch talk. I just don't get it.
Well, I don't get it either, So I'm old school too. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years now. So I get it. Yeah. No,
I was
that
actually born into it in a way,
uh-huh.
strange way. My parents, they met in the late 1980s, still behind the Iron Curtain. Um, they met in spiritualist circles, yogis, Buddhists, underground Catholics. So my father was trained in astrology by those occultists who were still surviving from the pre-communist times. Um, and they were match made by this genius mathematician, my parents, who was believed to be a reincarnation of an ancient Egyptian high priest.
Mm.
So like you could say that I was born into like a spiritual bloodline. I was the firstborn child. My siblings, they never got the taste for magic and the occult. It was just something special that my parents passed on to me because they actually attempted a ritualistic conception. I found this horoscope of my not only birth, of course, I had birth chart, but I had actually a horoscope of my conception.
Oh, wow. That's
So
interesting.
I don't think that my mother entirely understood what's going on. I think she just went along with whatever my father said, and she thought it was like fascinating because he was the kind of charismatic con man that you can picture. But I think he was actually aiming for something. He was aiming to bring something specific down to this planet, to this realm. And interestingly enough, when I then much later in life, just in recent years, when I started remembering my previous incarnations, my father was my father a bunch of times, and he always wasn't like an occultist or antiquarian, and he taught me these things. So we have had these roles before.
And may have them again.
I hope not.
Well, yeah, that's the goal. Break the cycle, right? At a certain point. No, that's fascinating though, because I mean that's not something that you necessarily hear about all the time. Certainly people have some strong psychic gifts and all that. Um, I always think it's interesting because there's always, the people who are naturally gifted or who end up having these experiences, are people who come into it because of something that happened. In my case, when I was 7 years old, I was drowned in the ocean.
Oh yeah,
And that
like the
was,
near-death experience is fairly common. I was very fortunate, always protected by, I believe, Lucifer himself. That's what he told me.
mhm.
That there was always this like a cloak of invisibility that I had over myself, and I didn't even know what it was. I actually only learned last year during like a channeling session, and the medium was channeling Lucifer really forcefully, and he was like, I'm fed up with being taken for granted. Who do you think got you out of all of your troubles in life? Where do you think you would have ended up if I wasn't there intervening? So I learned way, way later in life, like what forces were directing me. I'm also in touch with like certain types of extraterrestrial intelligences. But I had no clue about these things for a long time. And I backed off from the left-hand path several times because it was just too much. I just got scared, like where I'm being pulled into. I was scared that I would lose my soul or my capacity to be human.
Well, I think it's fair to say the left-hand path isn't just for anyone either. I mean, it's a
Oh,
very intense and
absolutely.
demanding path, and there's certainly interesting currents with it that come into play. I mean, I've kind of been on a variety of different paths, so I've definitely explored the left-hand path. I've explored other paths, and I would say that my own path, which is just kind of a blend of all the different things at this point, because I'm doing my own thing, experimenting and creating stuff, which is my want. But I don't think any magical path really is just for but especially something like the left-hand path, where it is much more intense, where you have like the path of poison, for example, and you have other aspects of it. You're working with these quote unquote darker forces, not that they're necessarily dark in a bad way, but that they're going to challenge you. I mean, the demonic, in a very real sense, calls on you to be more truthful with yourself than any other path I can think of, because they're
Or
not
you,
going to
or
put
you
up with
can just
anything.
avoid the challenge your entire life, and then you end up being an armchair scholar, of which there is plenty of them out there.
There are plenty of armchair cultists out
or you
there.
or you can end up being a hypocrite, which is something that you see too more among like the right hand path crowd. But I think it's a sad life where you would like avoid actual spiritual accomplishment and empowerment just for the sake of keeping your ego bullshit together.
Yeah. So do you feel like you were talking earlier how like when you were in Europe, you weren't as open about it. Do you feel like part of that was also because of perhaps like the political climate there, or was it just purely a case of, these people aren't really into it, and if I put myself out
I
there?
I personally think that um the main big thing is Europe is atheist,
Hmm.
basically. It's an agnostic land. It's very, very secular. So, and in the left hand path, we don't doubt the actual existence of demons. When somebody says they spoke to Lilith, they freaking spoke to Lilith, and we all take it for granted. But see, the atmosphere in Europe is like way more academic. People are just like tackling it. They don't really have the kind of drive, this primal drive that you see in Americans. Uh, Even the land itself is different. This country is like less civilized. United States, it's still the Wild West in many ways, and so the spirit of the left hand path is like more
Hmm.
conducive here.
So tell me a little more about like some of the work that you're doing right now with the Luciferian current. You recently moved from the West Coast to the East Coast, like
Oh,
literally a
i'm
week ago.
I'm sure that I'll get moved around some more. This wasn't really like a planned move, it was more like fleeing. So I get kicked from one coast to another, and I was experiencing like an onslaught of magical forces, dark powers in my life. Something was clearly trying to make me leave. But since I left for a better place, a safer place, I don't really perceive this as an attack. It's like we
Hmm.
all use magic, um, myself included. So, you know, it's been it's been quite an adventure. See, I can't really tell you, like I can't tell you where I am from, but I can't tell you where I am because I'm pretty sure I won't be here in, 6 months time.
Well,
I don't really.
I'm not worried about it one way or another. I mean, you'll land on your feet wherever you end up going. It seems like you do that a lot. But I mean, I think it's always interesting because, the reinvention of one's life is always an adventure in and of itself. I mean, I recently went through this myself this last year.
Some people seem to go through this more than others. And for me, this has been almost like a method to the madness, the left-hand path. I have sold all of my possessions and moved around and even changed my name a bunch of times in my life. And like, it's been picking up on speed over the past year because I went from Europe to Mexico to United States, from West Coast to East Coast. I had to let go of all of my material possessions several times because I just couldn't carry it all with me.
Mhm.
This is one of the things that Lucifer told me when I was leaving Oregon. Like I fled an abusive marriage basically to Washington. And he said, travel light. And here's the mistake that I made. I thought it was like a metaphysical statement. So I was like, oh, yes, we should contemplate non-attachment and all these things, materialism. But what he literally meant was downsize on your fucking luggage, because he knew that I wouldn't be able to stay for long. And so I had to move again. And then I ended up paying a surcharge of $200 because my luggage was oversized, overweight. And because of that very reason, stuff broke in it. Because the people who treat it, they hate it. They just toss it around and it's too heavy.
Well, it's an interesting point too, because sometimes, like you said, I mean, the advice of spirits can be literal, and where the tendency
Oh,
is, oh, I'm
absolutely.
communing with a spirit. It's spiritual, it's metaphysical, it's a metaphor, but actually can just be simply and purely a literal thing. Travel light, you know. So I think that that's a really good point to make. I mean, I think a lot of times people get caught up in the spiritual aspect of working with spirits and ignore
Oh,
the
absolutely.
the practical information, because the spirits are going to come through very practically. The work I was doing last night was with Marbaz, and ended up doing some dream work with him. And one of the things he was talking about was basically working with nerves and working with my body. And there's nothing metaphorical about it. It was, this is what you need to do in order if you want to get better results with your body, because
Oh,
he's a demon of
absolutely. They,
health.
they they will give you very particular advice, but sometimes they will refuse to. I run into this as well. Like spirits, I found out they don't want us to, you know, give up on our responsibility by asking them about every single thing. So whenever I try to make like business decisions and summon spirits to give me advice, a lot of times they would just say, look, this is on you. Or they would just keep silent. And I would know that, see, I will give you the guidance on the big stuff, but the small stuff, you have to, you have to take on that responsibility for yourself. Like we are not here to, to wipe your butt.
I like that. I think it's true too. I mean, there is I mean, the thing is that with the left-hand path, there is very much a valuing of the independence and kind of going down, discovering your own lessons. So I think that that's always a very important thing. One of the articles that you put out recently was like a series on love magic. And I was kind of curious as to your take on that, because one of the things you were talking about was, doing love magic to bring people together, but then doing love magic to bring people apart. And I've certainly had my own share and experience of that kind of topic before. So what are your thoughts about that? Let's talk a little
It
more
was
about
just
that.
a fairly improvised series of essays as I was just like wrapping up the recent experience I've had in my life. And, we always gather the experience and then we put it in boxes. And that's how the oral tradition of witchcraft is born. And that's how it is perpetuated. And I chose to share this stuff freely. I just put it out there. It gets shared. Love magic is the most challenging genre of magic. I believe you would agree, right?
I think it is. I mean, as an example, I think if you call somebody into your life, a lot of times people have this romantic notion as to what they're bringing into their life. What they don't realize is they're bringing all the baggage too, as an
Oh,
example.
yeah. Well, you will bring forward that which you asked for, the desire, but that may not match at all your needs. And then there is also the aspect of what do you actually deserve. So I think the magic is interplay between these three aspects. In the end, it always ends up being the one and the same thing. But from the psychological point of view, this is what I was always pushing hard on my own love magic workshop. You got to start differentiating between your desires and wants and your actual needs. Because love in the end it's a deep feeling that we have for someone who fulfills our deepest needs. And everybody has them slightly different personality makeup. And we also all want to be accepted for who we are. So the simplest definition of love would be, it's a feeling that is elicited when you feel that you are accepted exactly for who you are. And that's a deep, deep thing, because I just came to the realization today that I wasn't really accepted and appreciated for who I am in my life. It was just a pretty cover. That's what everybody sees. That's what men want to adorn their lives with. But then you realize that they don't really care for your future, for your survival, for your well-being, just for what they can get out of it. And this is the main problem with love magic. Everybody thinks that they somehow deserve something. There's a huge entitlement. People make up these like manifestation boards and lists, listing all the qualities of the ideal mate, the soulmate. That's what everybody concentrates on. And I mean, it's good to have standards. And of course, it's good to explore your needs, and be honest about it. Like, can you accept somebody with children? Can you accept somebody older, somebody who is not into the same things? Or can't you? And it comes with life experience.
Oh, yeah.
It's not all that it's cracked up to be. And then when you see how people use love magic, you realize that they are just there's a lot of delusion going on that is either totally unreal or out of their league, and basically force it with magic. They try to force reality to conform to their delusions instead of using magic to manifest, their true desire.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, because I think a lot of times, we do get caught up in very specific idealistic notions as to what we want. And
they might not even be true. Like, you might get the thing that you asked for, but what they say, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. And I think I think it's when you get past that initial experience that you begin to discover, well, what is really real here, and it ties into that need. So if you can do that ahead of time, that's a good thing. But so that's a very interesting thing. One thing that kind of struck me about some of your writing too is, I mean, you do have this ongoing relationship with Lucifer. As you said, at one point he kind of came through and he's like, stop taking me for granted. But can you talk a bit about what an ongoing relationship with a spirit looks like, and offer any suggestions on that? Because I mean, I think that in its own way is a very specific type of relationship that a lot of people take for granted, but nonetheless can be a very powerful experience in and of itself.
Well, it's a challenging relationship. It is like marriage. Very much. Spirits even have some human traits. Like Lucifer, for example, has pride. He doesn't want to admit mistake or defeat. He's very political, very cunning, very scheming, can't be outsmarted. He can come out as cold or callous, like he's using you for his own purposes, for his own games. He will not tell you the entirety of his plans. I know that people seek out relationships with spirits like for devotional purposes, to elevate themselves. But the way I experience my demonic contracts is, it's not that way at all. It's pretty much like being locked in a room with someone, bound to them with chains, and you just have to make it work, because neither one of you is getting out of those chains. That's what spiritual pacts, soul contracts do. And of course, you don't have to take pacts. That's just my personal path. And I've been criticized for this a lot. Like, people have accused me of being a Christian or Christian agent, or this is the most ridiculous insult to me, honestly. I don't know where they would come up with this, but then I thought about it, and I think where it's coming from is I speak about such things as pain, sacrifice, displeasing the spirits, being punished, and all of these things are entirely real, of course, but the modern Western practitioner doesn't want to hear about it, because they think that they can toss all of these concepts when they leave Christianity, and that it's all just going to be, unicorns and roses and power and manifesting, and the spirits they just project their daddy issues on
don't forget the rainbows. That's a very interesting point, because the truth is that you can't have a relationship without give and take both ways. And so, like, Absolutely. If you're going to work with spirits, there simply is not a way to get out of the reality that, for example, if you make a promise and you break that promise, that there's going to be consequences, or that there's going to be.
Absolutely. That's one surefire way how to curse yourself: breaking promises, oaths to spirits or humans or other practitioners.
Yeah, or like the sacrifices that come along the way. I mean, there's no such thing as doing this work without some kind of sacrifice. I mean, I've certainly seen that myself in my own life. I've seen it with other people, and it kind of surprises me sometimes when people don't acknowledge that, because it's like, well, you want it to be this very specific context, but it's not. They get this notion that with magic, for example, that they can just get whatever they want. That's one of the things that really stands out to me. And it's like, well, yes.
That's probably the consumerist culture there at fault, I think. We have been conditioned to the illusion that we can get whatever we want from advertising. And many people, most, do approach magic and magicians in this way. But it's really the longest shortcut you could take. Well, you manifest one thing, at the expense of another thing. And what you're going to do then, like keep throwing spells at it?
Yeah, well, it's kind of the peril of results-based magic. Not that results-based magic doesn't have its place. It does. I mean, there are times where you need to manifest a result, and that's okay. But I think that and this is kind of a realization that I've come out to through the years myself, is that at a certain point, you also have to really be focused on just the path and doing the work and on the journey itself, and instead of being focused on the result, because the result is just a sign along the way indicating where you could go.
Absolutely. And that's where you end up after you master magic, like you actually master manifestation. You realize how faulty this whole process is, that you can actually screw yourself up by getting what you want, and that maybe you should not be abusing these powers. And then comes the surrender, to the path itself. I don't really do results-oriented magic or like low magic rituals much anymore. When I do, it always has a massive effect on my life. So what I have grown to understand is that once you're serious with ritual and serious with spirits, and they can actually hear you and you hear them, there is no such thing as a small spell or a small ritual.
Yeah.
Nothing. You can think that what you're asking for is like a minor thing. No, it can be that one thing that broke the camel's back, and you wouldn't know it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point to make, and it's something that's really fascinating. Like, at a certain point, you have to know when to stop on the results and focus more on the journey. I mean, I'll admit, like this last year, I did some results-based magic, kind of focused on getting my life back into order, and everything. But like once I wrapped up to a certain point, it's like, okay, I've done enough. Now I'm just going to let everything settle, and I'm going to focus on this other work that I need to do.
Or you can keep blasting it until you collapse.
Yeah,
that's kind of what the left-hand path crowd does. Like they will keep blasting the rituals until everything unravels, and then they will continue with it.
Well, see, I find it interesting because you're one of the few people that I've heard kind of takes a similar approach to myself, which is that it's like, okay, at a certain point, like knowing when to surrender to the current and work with the current and allow that to just take you wherever you need to go instead of trying to force it all the time. Because every time you just try to force it at a certain point, like you said, it just, you
Oh,
burn out.
you can't force anything. See, I was experiencing some problems. An associate friend told me you gotta evoke Belial, like when you're being harassed by police and eviction. So I did, and 36 hours later, I find myself in an overnight flight to the East Coast. So, you know, like every time you invite these powers into your life, you need to be ready and willing to accept any kind of development whatsoever. Because you don't know where the path is going to take you. All you can do is hold your head because the wind is blowing and have faith. And faith is kind of like a dirty word among Satanists. But
Among
God,
occultists in
like
general.
faith is all we have, really. What is there without it?
Yeah. Well, no, that's an interesting point again, because I actually think that faith is kind of treated as a dirty word in general in occultism, not even just like with Satanists, but like really, it's not a word that's typically thrown around. But it's good point to make. At a certain point, you just have to have faith, and a lot of people are like, "Well, faith, what is that?"
There is several aspects to it. You can have faith in the spirits, or you can have faith in yourself as a magician. You should never lose that. Or you can have faith in something more abstract, like, the law of nature, destiny, some kind of pattern that is out there. Any form of faith will work, but you have to have it.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And it's absolutely a fascinating point to make. And it's something that is relevant. We have to entertain different perspectives. I think a lot of times people just get tunnel visioned. So adding something in like faith can be it kind of fits into my sense, into the sense of destiny too. Like we have free will, but we also have destiny. We have free will.
It's a path of trial and error, and some crossroads are just inevitable. Like you'll end up on them regardless of what path you take. All paths lead to Rome. And for me, one of these things have been like ending up in USA. It's just like, no matter how I even tried to avoid it at certain point, it was just, I kept running into Yankees everywhere.
Yankees.
Everywhere. Then I moved on the street with the American Embassy, which was fairly bizarre. And then I ended up renting out a witchcraft studio on the same block, which was like even closer to the embassy. So I was like, okay, we are circling something here. So the only place where this can lead is actually physically overseas. And that's what happened, even though I wasn't planning it. I was quite pissed at the direction of this country.
It kind of created a sympathetic link between you. Every encounter just built up resonance, and then it continued to build up and build up and build up, and it created an inevitable path.
Yes. Plus I have been here before several times, and I have done magic, and that magic is still rippling through the ethers. It cannot be undone. It's in the past.
Mm-hmm. So one of the impressions I have is that you offer services. Do you still offer services, or no longer?
I will again. Like right
Yeah.
now, I'm on a sabbatical because I'm dealing with other things. I'm getting my teaching, my lessons getting on track right now.
What
But I will get to it later. Of course, I have been doing all kinds of readings and consultations my entire life.
what kind of readings and consultations have you done in the past?
Classical traditional fortune telling, like Russian gypsy cards or the Bohemian playing cards. These are oracles that I took with me because it's a part of my heritage and it's very rare here. So that's something that I want to, preserve, like an ancestral heritage. I also do past life regression or past life reading. I have this ability to see people's past, which is fairly unique. I can sometimes like channel messages for them from spirits, but usually this is best achieved when two people are doing it, like one of them is a medium and the other one asks questions. Yeah, I've done a lot of that type of work. I've been a professional witch for over a decade. I never had a reputable 9 to 5 job.
You're not missing out on anything.
I'm sure. Just saying.
Yeah, no, it's nothing. Yeah. It's interesting.
But most people come to me actually for more like spiritual guidance, mentoring, to ask about their path and spirits that they work with and their unique experience. So I do in private what I do on our live stream show, where we basically just dash out knowledge wide and free.
Tell us about the live stream show. So, because that's a show that you're starting up again, or is it?
Oh no, it's been
been
continuously going on since last year. I think around Halloween, the Devil's Disciples. We do twice a week on Wednesdays, 11 a.m. Pacific time. We always feature a demonic spirit. It's like a bit of like a black mass dedicated to a certain spirit, but we don't only talk about that spirit, wherever the path takes us. And then every Friday, we bring on another initiate of the occult, ranging from people who were like published and relatively high profile to like total nobodies. So it's a mix. The only thing that matters is the person bringing to the table some authentic gnosis. Are they serious about the spiritual path? Because we don't care about credentials or political correctness.
Oh, well, nor should we. I mean, I think at a certain point you just have to put stuff out there that is relevant and challenges things. If you're not doing that, then what's the point? There's certainly no point in just continuing to perpetuate the stream of PC or anything else that goes on.
It's become a popularity contest with the advent of social media. Everybody wants to be famous. So that has corrupted the occult circle in like a yet new way.
Fame isn't all it's cracked up to be. I think that it's interesting that people quote unquote want to be famous. It's like, well, what are you really getting out of that anyway? I would rather just focus on doing the work. I think it's more important.
Many people have their wishes fulfilled and then they realize that it's actually terrible, that they cannot deal with the drama, with the exposure, the gossip, having their personal lives out there, that you become targeted by crazy people, stalked, harassed. So yeah, I did this thing already in my 20s. I was on late night TV and magazine covers, and boy, did I realize the dark side of fame early on. I wasn't prepared for it at that age at all. And then you cannot backtrack from it. And once you like start losing privacy and being surrounded by fake friends, feeling like a sellout, burning out.
Yeah, no, I get it. I've had my own experiences with fame, and not magazine covers and stuff, but it's one of those things where it can be very toxic in its own right. And so that's where you have to stay true to yourself more so than ever. And I would imagine that like in that context that working with Lucifer is even really helpful, because Lucifer of all beings would understand that. And really
Lucifer really likes to have like high profile people who are visible. He is all about like the glory and fame. He's got a lot of people in show business. That's almost become like a cliche at this point. Luciferians always have the shine, they always have some kind of glamour, and many of them have the pride too. I think it's a great test. Can you stay true to yourself or not? Because like the thing that you don't see is the audience, the people who follow you. Once there is a mass of them, that is an actual energy that is pressing against you, your energy. And like you have responsibility, A, to direct this current. You have to be a good example, and B, you have to face this energy constantly. And let's admit it, people are retarded. they want the shortcut, they want to buy stuff, they want to be fooled. Like the Romans said, mundus vult decipiat, the world wants to be fooled. So are you going to sell out? Are you going to succumb to the temptation or not? And many people, they burn out or they succumb, and it's very visible in USA in like the high class new age scene, where you can sell, retreats for $5,000 easily, conferences, private coaching. There's like a real celebrity layer of people in the new age crowds, and it's just the same thing then that what everybody does. It's no longer about the spiritual. And I have met in person people who have shot up this way, and then you have this beautiful guru from India, one day doing yoga lessons in your underground studio for a few bucks, and 3 years later he comes back to your city and they charge $500 to see him. Why? What has changed? He's still teaching the same thing. His producers have changed.
That's an interesting point. It kind of reminds me a bit of like what I've observed with just different celebrities, how some of them go crazy too with that current, like you were talking about, the current of energy that comes at them from people and stuff. And what's interesting is what you're dealing with is the personification of that person versus the reality of that person.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I changed my name to my spiritual name, Anima Noira. But then I backtracked from this step because there was no more any layer of protection between me and the public self, the author. That's why authors use author names, because it allows us to, have some kind of buffer between us and our work. We can assume different personas. It's not us, it's a piece of art. So when you become too big and you identify too much with what you do, you become basically like a victim to your own egregore. It eats you up.
Yeah, no, that's true. You have to find a way to ground it out. I actually do use my real name with my writing.
I thought so, but
yeah.
It's a cool name. It sounds like druidic, Celtic.
Well, the interesting thing though is I don't use the middle name. I keep the middle name out, and I do that very purposely for the reason that you mentioned, because then I have that buffer. So I have my first and my last name, but I don't use my middle name. If I use the middle name, which would totally go with it, I mean, it would be like an even better author name than it already is. And it is a pretty cool author name. But the fact of the matter is, I always bore that in mind. I'm like, I need to have a certain layer. There is something to be said for that. And of course, there's also
there is an entire science, for like in publishing industry. You cannot sell criminal thriller novels when your name is Alison Potter. I think that's an actual name of one author out there. Alison Potter sounds like a friendly neighbor who will invite you for a cup of tea. So they actually changed her name to Lee Knight or something that sounds like dark and manly and hard-hitting, because she's writing crime novels. There's been male authors of romance who have lived their entire life for decades under the privacy of an assumed female pseudonym, and nobody ever found out until their death. That's magic.
No, that's a lot of magic. That's shape changing right there.
But that's we don't have to do this for us. We do this for the people, because it's the people who will not, buy the novel from you when your name doesn't sound right. We have to do this glamour magic for them. They want it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there you go. And I think I just kind of lucked out. My name naturally ended up being, I didn't have to come up with an author name. I already had one. That's funny. So what kind of, so of course you're going to get back into training and consulting at some point. Do you have some book projects on the horizon? And
yes, I'm working on a trilogy of grimoires. The first one, Grimoire of the Flaming Knights. I would actually love to finish it this year, like by the end of the year. I'm working on a documentary movie, which I'm gonna release in June. So after that, I want to get back to the book. You know, those are the kinds of projects that just compete on the level of absolute non-lucrativeness. Like videography is probably even worse than publishing, but at least you can get it out there pretty fast. Unlike a book. So I do want to write a series of grimoires and just sum up what I know about practical magic and how to do magic, so that, you know, there is like a legacy after me. But I just like telling a story. You know, I don't think that what I have is so unique that the world would like die without it. I think there's been a lot of great books written, a lot of great, you know, courses, workshops. I don't even think that it is so necessary to teach people magic, like practical magic, manifestation. But I do believe that they need to be encouraged in seeking out their path and their gnosis, and in, you know, believing in themselves, in their experience. That's what is missing.
Mhm. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on to the show here. And it's always wonderful to get to meet different people and learn what their paths are. And as I said, I've been following you for a little while now, so this has been really cool. Before we wrap up, one more time, if you can share where we can find you on the web, and then also any final words of wisdom.
Inner-ignition.net. Well, maybe a quote, which is not mine. Find what you love and let it kill you.
Oh, who said that?
Charles Bukowski, the American
okay.
novelist.
Okay, there you go. I love it. All right, well, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed the opportunity to get to know you better and learn a bit more about you and your path, and I know my viewers will as well. And folks, you can see Anima's website in the show notes below, so go check her stuff out.